There are some nights you don't forget, not because they're loud or dramatic or filled with some huge, defining moment, but because they whisper just loud enough to change everything. That night I came home soaked. Not just from the storm that was ripping through Omaha, but from the kind of exhaustion that settles deep in your bones after a day you'd rather not remember. 8 hours of lifting and stacking poultry crates in the loading bay, another 2 arguing with dispatch over misplaced delivery logs. My boots were still caked in dried mud from the morning shift change, and my jacket, which I'd stupidly left unzipped, was clinging to me like a second skin. I was wet, cold, and starving. I pulled into the driveway and noticed the porch light was out. Not a huge deal, it happens during storms. But when I stepped out of the truck and looked up at the house, something didn't sit right. No soft glow from the hallway lamp Laura always left on. No flicker from the kitchen window. The whole place looked like it was holding its breath. I pushed open the front door, expecting the smell of tacos or at least the familiar warmth of our old heater kicking on. Instead, there was just stillness. Empty, hollow stillness. "Laura," I called out. Nothing. I flipped the light switch in the entryway. Dead. Power must have gone out. I kicked off my boots, peeled off my soaked jacket, and stepped quietly through the living room. The only sound was the soft squelch of my wet socks on the floor. That's when I saw her. She was in the kitchen, sitting at the table. Not moving. Not startled by me walking in. Just waiting. Laura was dressed up. Not in a flashy way, but done up enough to be noticeable. Tight black athletic jacket, makeup carefully applied, subtle but intentional. Her lips had a fresh coat of gloss, and her eyeliner, usually reserved for evenings out, was sharp and defined. She didn't look like someone settling in for a cozy night. She looked like someone who was either about to leave, or just got back from somewhere she wasn't supposed to be. Her phone lit up in her hand, casting a pale glow on her face. She didn't look up. Didn't greet me. Just kept scrolling. Then the screen buzzed again, and that's when I saw it. A message preview popped up under the name S. "You have no idea how much I needed last night." Friday. My heart didn't race. It just kind of stopped. Like a cold hand gripped my chest and pressed pause on everything. I didn't say anything right away. Just stood there, dripping in the dark, watching her pretend I hadn't seen it. Beside her plate sat 2 soft tacos untouched. Mine and hers both cold now. And next to them, folded neatly, was the note I'd left on the counter before work that morning. "You're my everything." I'd scribbled it in Sharpie like some hopeless romantic, thinking it might brighten her day. She hadn't even opened it. "Did you bring in the mail?" she asked, finally glancing up. Her tone was light. Casual. Like I hadn't just read something that yanked the floor out from under me. "Storm knocked the box halfway open," I said, voice low. "Didn't check." She nodded like that was the end of that. I wanted to ask. To demand. To scream even. But something about her stillness, her eerie calm, made me feel like I was already too late. Then she spoke again. "I'm sorry dinner got cold. I wasn't sure when you'd be home." It was such a simple sentence. Normal, even. But it made my skin crawl. Because it wasn't the words, it was how detached she sounded saying them. Like we were 2 strangers having small talk at a bus stop. I sat down slowly, not taking my eyes off her. "Who's S?" She looked at me for the first time, really looked, and I could see her calculation kick in. Not panic. Just strategy. She tilted her head, furrowed her brow slightly. "What?" Your phone lit up. Message from someone named S. Said they needed last night. Asked about Friday. She gave a tiny, practiced laugh. "Oh, that's just Steve. From the volunteer board. He jokes around." That sense of humor. Didn't sound like a joke. It was. She said it fast. Too fast. I didn't respond. That's when she started in with the guilt. "You know, it's been really hard lately. With you working so much. You come home exhausted. We barely talk. It's like I don't even know how to connect with you sometimes." I just stared at her. "I'm not making excuses," she said quickly, holding her hands up. "I'm just saying maybe we've both been drifting." And just like that, she flipped the script. I was tired, yes. Distant, probably. But I wasn't the one sneaking around, getting messages that read like the end of a romance novel. Still, she kept going. "You've been so consumed with work. I feel like a roommate, not a wife. I've been trying to fill my time with productive things, outreach, meetings, projects. It's not easy feeling invisible in your own home." She made herself sound like a victim. Like she just accidentally stumbled into emotional ambiguity. Like Steve's message was just a poorly timed fluke in a sea of harmless connections. I didn't know what to say. It's not that I believed her. I didn't. But hearing her say all the right things, watching her play the part so convincingly, made me second-guess everything I thought I knew. That's the worst kind of betrayal, the kind that doesn't just hurt your heart but makes you question your own eyes. I got up from the table without touching the food. "I'm gonna shower," I muttered. She nodded. "Okay." As I walked down the hall, I heard her phone buzz again. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. That night, as hot water scalded the numbness from my skin, I stood with my hands braced against the tile and asked myself one question over and over. How long had I been looking the other way? That night I couldn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind hit the windows. My body was still sore from work, but the ache in my chest had nothing to do with crates or concrete. It was something else, something colder. I could hear Laura's steady breathing beside me, calm as ever, like nothing had changed. Like I hadn't walked into a scene that made my gut twist into knots. I didn't close my eyes once. Instead, I replayed every moment I'd ignored. Every sign I'd waved away with excuses. And there were a lot more than I wanted to admit. Her phone habits had shifted first. Small things. She started flipping it face down during dinner. Switched to Do Not Disturb by default. Sometimes it buzzed and she wouldn't even look at it, just got up and left the room. I chalked it up to stress, meetings, book club chatter. I wanted to believe she was just overwhelmed. But the changes came faster after that. Her work schedule, for one. She'd always had a steady 9 to 5 at the regional library. Nothing fancy. Nothing unpredictable. But suddenly there were after-hours events. Off-site trainings. Weekend conferences. At first, I supported it. I even admired it, thought she was pushing herself to grow. But then she stopped inviting me. I remembered one weekend in late July. She said she had a grant writing workshop out of town. Friday through Sunday. She kissed me on the cheek, threw a small bag into her trunk, and drove off. No updates. No calls. Just short texts, hours apart, filled with generic words like busy, all good, talk soon. I asked her to send pictures. She said she forgot her charger. When she got back, there were no pamphlets, no receipts, no new ideas she wanted to bounce off me. Nothing. She didn't even seem tired, just distant. She spent that whole Monday folding laundry and humming some unfamiliar tune like she'd brought home a part of a different life. Her appearance changed too. Not in a dramatic way, but gradually enough that it snuck up on me. Laura was always beautiful but never fussy. She used to live in oversized hoodies and messy buns, with a coffee mug always within reach. Now it was tailored jeans, silk blouses, perfume I didn't recognize. Her hair had new layers. Her nails were always done. When I asked about the shift, she smiled and said she was just trying to feel more like herself. But it didn't feel like her. It felt like someone she was becoming for someone else. Even our routines unraveled. We used to make pancakes every Sunday morning. I'd flip while she stirred and we'd argue about whether blueberries belonged in the batter. They do. But then she started having early meetings on Sundays. Or she'd sleep in and say she wasn't hungry. I kept making pancakes anyway for a while, just in case. Eventually, I stopped. Our shows, the dumb crime dramas we watched religiously after dinner, started playing to an empty couch. She'd slip away to take a call, or jump into a quick Zoom, then disappear into the bathroom for 30-40 minutes. I'd hear muffled laughter through the door like she was in another world. I remember knocking once, just to ask if everything was okay. She came out with red cheeks and said she'd gotten caught up watching funny TikToks. The worst part? I believed her. Or maybe I didn't. Maybe I just wanted to. I didn't want to see what was in front of me. I didn't want to admit the truth because if I did, then I had to face the fact that the person I loved, the person I trusted, was already halfway gone. And then there was the fight. It was late September. She told me she had a fundraising breakfast on Saturday morning. I offered to drive her, figured it was a small way to support her. She snapped. "I'm not a child, Jason," she said. "You don't have to monitor my every move." It wasn't what she said, it was how fast she said it. How ready she was. Like she'd been rehearsing that line for weeks. I remember just standing there, holding my car keys, feeling like I'd been slapped without being touched. She left that morning without saying goodbye. When she got home, she dropped a pastry bag on the counter and said, "Thought you might like a muffin." I said thank you. She kissed my forehead. And just like that, everything reset, except it didn't. The emotional distance became physical. She stopped reaching for my hand at dinner. Stopped leaning on me during movies. I'd come home and she'd barely look up. Some nights I wondered if she even noticed I was gone. There were no more spontaneous hugs. No inside jokes. Just polite conversations like we were coworkers sharing a kitchen. I started to feel invisible. Like I was living in the echo of something that used to feel warm. Then I found the charger cord. It was in the back seat of her car, a second phone charger tucked under an old sweatshirt. I hadn't ridden in her car in weeks, but I'd needed to move it out of the driveway. When I bent down to grab something, I saw it, the charger, still plugged into the lighter port. She told me she didn't charge her phone that weekend in July because she forgot her cord. Maybe it was a backup. Maybe she just didn't want to talk to me. That charger felt heavier than it should have. By mid-October, I stopped asking questions. I told myself it was just a phase. That people change. That maybe I was the one slipping, missing her cues, failing to keep up. But deep down, I knew better. I could feel the space growing between us, not slowly, but like something deliberate. Like she was carving out a new life for herself, piece by piece, and there was no room for me in it. I didn't confront her. Not directly. I think some part of me was still holding out hope that I was wrong. That maybe I was just tired. Overworked. Paranoid. But once you start seeing the cracks, you can't unsee them. And when they start to scream at you from every direction, silence becomes the loudest answer of all. I stopped trying to make her explain things. By then, words had become a smokescreen. Every answer she gave sounded smooth, prepared, like she'd been waiting to spin it just right. I wasn't interested in hearing how I was misinterpreting things or how I was being overly suspicious. I wanted something more solid, truth, not interpretation. So I stopped listening and started watching. One Tuesday afternoon, she mentioned a small celebration for a local outreach initiative she helped coordinate. Just a few people, she said. Industry folks. Nothing formal. Definitely not for spouses. She tossed the word private around like it was an afterthought. It's not even a big deal, she added, sipping coffee like she hadn't just excluded me from another part of her life. I nodded. Said nothing. Just smiled and asked if she'd need the car. She said Steve was picking her up. Of course he was. I'd already figured out that S stood for Steve Marlowe. I'd looked him up after that first message. He worked in nonprofit development, ran in the same volunteer circles, and, according to his very public Instagram, was recently rediscovering joy through meaningful connections. Gross. But what really caught my attention wasn't the cheesy captions. It was a tagged photo someone else had posted, Laura and Steve sitting side by side at an outdoor cafe, laughing. Her hand on his forearm. No wedding ring. It had been taken 3 days before she claimed to be in Lincoln for an education seminar. I didn't bring it up. Not right away. I wanted more than *TS and instincts. I wanted something undeniable. So I called in a favor. An old high school buddy of mine, Marcus, worked catering gigs through a private staffing agency. The kind of places where you sign NDAs and wear white gloves. He owed me for helping him move 3 times in 1 year, so when I asked if he could get me into a high-profile donor event happening at a lakeside estate just outside Omaha, he didn't even flinch. That's the one with the glass ballroom and jazz band, right? He said. You sure you want to go? I just need to see something, I told him. 2 days later, I had a forged badge clipped to a borrowed sport coat and a GPS pin for a place I'd never been. The drive out was long and quiet. I didn't play music. Didn't call anyone. Just kept picturing her sitting at that cafe with Steve, leaning in close like she used to with me. Laughing with that breathy, head-tilted laugh I used to think was meant just for us. By the time I pulled up to the gated driveway, I'd already memorized every lie she'd told me in the past 6 months. The estate was something out of a magazine. Long gravel road. Manicured hedges. Lights that lined the walkway in a soft amber glow. Jazz music floated through the night air like it belonged there, elegant, effortless. I parked near the edge of the guest lot and walked toward the entrance like I belonged. Security at the door barely glanced at my badge. I was in. The ballroom was made entirely of glass, walls, ceiling, even the entry doors. It sat at the edge of a still lake, its surface mirroring the string lights and shifting silhouettes inside. People in suits and gowns floated across the floor, holding champagne flutes, murmuring about grant cycles and outreach metrics. No one noticed me. That was the beauty of places like this. Everyone's too self-involved to question who you are. And then I saw her. She was standing near the bar, dressed in a fitted midnight blue dress I'd never seen before. Her hair was curled softly, her heels high enough to make her posture proud but effortless. She looked radiant, confident, like someone who had long since stopped living in my orbit. Standing next to her was Steve. He wasn't touching her, not directly, but the space between them wasn't professional. It was close, familiar. An asterisk mate. They leaned into each other when they spoke, their shoulders tilted inward. She laughed, placing a hand lightly against his arm. He whispered something, and she smiled without blinking, the slow, certain smile that I hadn't seen directed at me in months. And that's when Laura saw me. Our eyes locked. But she didn't flinch, didn't gasp or turn away. She looked at me like I was a stranger, like I'd wandered into the wrong room and embarrassed myself. Then, calm as ever, she turned and murmured something to a staff member. I knew what was coming. Moments later, a man in a tailored vest approached me and asked if I could step outside for a quick word. Polite, but firm. I nodded. No scene. No resistance. Just followed him out the same way I came in. But I wasn't leaving empty-handed. What Laura didn't know, what Steve didn't know, was that I'd already set everything in motion. The week before, I'd followed them after one of her late meetings. Parked 2 cars back and waited. Watched them pull into a side street downtown and sit in his car for over 30 minutes. No movement. No talking. Just still. Then, like something out of a cliché, she leaned in and kissed him. I took pictures. Not out of revenge, but because I needed the truth to be undeniable, even to me. That afternoon, before I ever stepped into that ballroom, I sent those photos to a list of people tied to the event: organizers, sponsors, board members. A brief email. No threats. No commentary. Just time-stamped images of their 2 keynote darlings locked in a parked embrace outside a coffee shop they probably thought no one would notice. By the time I reached the parking lot again, phones were already buzzing. I heard it before I saw it, music softening, voices quieting. That strange hush that falls when something cuts through a room all at once. I didn't turn around. Didn't need to. Because in that moment I wasn't the one being removed from the building. I was the reason it had just changed shape. I didn't go home right away. After I left the estate, I drove. No destination. No music. Just the hum of the engine and the sound of my own thoughts slamming against each other like fists in a locked room. The adrenaline that carried me through the night started to thin out, leaving something heavier in its place. Numbness, maybe. Or clarity. Hard to tell the difference when you're on the other side of a lie. I passed a gas station around midnight, pulled in, and sat there for 15 minutes before deciding I didn't need anything. Just wanted the flicker of fluorescent light to remind me I was still real. That the last few hours hadn't been some dream I'd wake up from to find Laura curled beside me asking about breakfast. But the kitchen would be cold. The bed half empty. And nothing I'd seen through that glass ballroom would ever disappear from my mind. When I finally got home, the house was still dark. Still quiet. Laura hadn't come back. I didn't expect her to. I left the front porch light off. Didn't bother changing out of my clothes. Just walked into the living room and dropped into the recliner, the same one we used to share during Sunday night marathons of crime shows and popcorn fights. Now it felt like a relic. I slept there, if you can call it sleep. Woke up stiff, groggy, with the taste of silence still thick in the air. Her keys didn't jingle in the lock that morning. Her shoes didn't appear by the door. I checked my phone out of habit, nothing. But hers, sitting on the kitchen counter where she'd left it after the last time I caught a glimpse of a message from Steve, was lighting up like a distress beacon. 16 missed calls. A string of texts. Names I didn't recognize and some I did, people from the library board, outreach team, former coworkers. The screen kept flashing. Steve Marlowe, 3 missed calls. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. By noon, her social media was gone. Profiles deleted. No trace of her smile, her captions, the curated photos of us at barbecues or fundraising walks. Just gone, like she had decided to erase the parts of herself that could still be seen. I kept checking. Not because I hoped to see something new, but because watching her disappear in real time felt like proof that I wasn't imagining it all. She came back 2 days later. I was standing by the sink, staring out the kitchen window with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours earlier. The sound of her car pulling into the driveway didn't startle me. It felt like the end of a countdown. She walked in without ceremony. No knock, no key fumbling. Just opened the door and stepped into the mess she'd left behind. She looked small, not in size, but in spirit. Her eyes were sunken, makeup smudged, like she hadn't slept or had stopped trying to hide it. Her confident posture, shoulders back, chin lifted, was gone. She moved like someone who was waiting for judgment and had already accepted it. She didn't speak. Neither did I. She stood there in the living room, holding her purse in both hands like it might float away if she let go. Finally, I said, "You hungry?" She shook her head. "No." I nodded and turned back toward the window. After a few minutes, she placed her purse on the counter, slipped off her shoes, and stood there like she wasn't sure where she was allowed to go. I handed her a sheet of paper from the drawer. It wasn't official, just a list. Handwritten. Conditions. Separate bedrooms. Full transparency. Every password to every device. No secrets. No delays. She would attend therapy, non-negotiable. I didn't want promises or tears or explanations, just actions. She read the list, then looked up at me with glassy eyes and said, "Okay." No protest, no deflection, just that one word. Honest. Hollow. Then she added her own line, scribbled at the bottom in her careful handwriting. "I'll leave my job if that's what it takes." That part almost broke me, not because I pitied her, but because it sounded like a line someone says when they're finally out of excuses. When surrender is the only way forward. And from that moment on, things changed. She didn't beg. She didn't try to charm her way back into the life she'd been slowly leaking out of for months. She just did the work. 2 days later, I came home to find a printed email from her therapist confirming she'd started sessions. It was paper-clipped to a sticky note that said, "You don't have to read it. I just want you to know it's real." She started folding my laundry again, cooking dinner quietly, not in a "look how helpful I am" way, just doing it, like she was rebuilding without asking if I'd stay to see the end. Every evening, she left short handwritten notes on the kitchen counter, summarizing what she'd talked about in therapy. Not dramatic, just real. Things like, Session 1, I talked about control, about how I mistake admiration for love. Or, Session 3, I cried, admitted I missed the version of me who didn't need validation, didn't realize she was gone. It wasn't performative. It wasn't manicured. It was raw and awkward and human. I didn't respond to the notes, didn't praise her, but I read every word. Eventually, she moved into the guest room. No questions asked. Didn't try to soften the blow. She made the bed, brought in her things, and stayed out of the master bedroom. Every now and then, I'd hear her crying behind the door, but quietly, not for attention, just letting the weight of it all settle. One night, she handed me her old phone. No reset, no factory wipe, just gave it to me with the lock screen still on. "I haven't touched anything," she said. "You can look. Or not. It's up to you." I didn't open it right away, but when I did, I saw everything. The message threads, the selfies she never posted, a string of late-night chats with Steve that read like slow-motion sabotage, moments where she should have stopped but didn't. Some were flirty, some were emotional, all of them were wrong, but there was no attempt to delete anything, no hidden folders, no buried apps. She had deleted the shared photo albums, the joint cloud account, but not to hide, just to dismantle what was no longer real. Her email thread with Steve, gone. And when I checked the account logins, it wasn't just erased. It was closed, terminated, no forwarding address. She was unraveling the lie, thread by thread, and leaving it all on the table. And still, I said nothing. I didn't trust her yet. I didn't trust that this wasn't another story, another carefully shaped performance. But I was watching closely, not because I wanted to punish her, but because I wasn't ready to believe in good intentions without proof anymore. The weirdest part? I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel anything close to rage or revenge. Just this dull, constant pressure in my chest, like holding your breath in a room full of smoke. Because when the fire goes out and the smoke clears and the person standing in front of you isn't the one you remember, the question isn't how could they? It's who are they now? And are they someone worth knowing again? It's strange how power shifts when nobody's shouting. I always thought the end of something like this would come with slammed doors, ultimatums, dramatic declarations. But the real power, the kind that lingers and reshapes everything, moved in quietly like fog. No raised voices. No broken plates. Just distance. Boundaries. Silence that started to mean something. Laura didn't ask to come back into the bedroom. Didn't try to reclaim our routines or apologize in waves. She respected the rules. That was new. She cooked most nights but never asked if I'd eat. Just left the plate out, cleaned it up afterward whether I touched it or not. She started leaving the bathroom door cracked open when she went in with her phone. Sometimes she left it on the counter entirely. No passwords. No codes. No more buzzing at 11:47 p.m. and hushed laughter behind the door. The phone became just a phone again. The first time I noticed, I stood there for a good 2 minutes staring at it, untouched, charging beside her keys. Something about the simplicity of it, the lack of tension, the absence of secrecy made my stomach knot in ways I wasn't ready to unpack. There was no affection. Not in the traditional sense. She didn't reach for my hand. Didn't lean into me on the couch. She sat at the far end of the living room in silence, reading or journaling, sometimes turning pages too slowly to be absorbed. She was in the house, but not in the way she used to be. She wasn't asking for space. She was giving it. A couple of weeks in, she left me a short note next to the coffee maker. Her handwriting was a little uneven. I'm not asking for a second chance. I'm asking for limits so I remember what I broke. No begging. No manipulation. Just those words folded neatly under a spoon. That one stuck with me more than anything she'd said in the therapy notes. It made me think of how often she used to try to fix things with affection, kiss the argument away, brush the truth under small kindnesses. She had a gift for resetting the mood, steering us back into routine so neither of us had to confront what was quietly dying between us. But now? She wasn't trying to steer anything. She was just there. Present but not performative. I watched her closely. Not with suspicion but with curiosity. The woman across from me looked like Laura, sounded like Laura, but she wasn't the same. That shine she used to wear like armor was gone. She moved differently, slower, like someone carrying a load they had finally stopped pretending wasn't there. One evening, I came home late, real late. A double shift and a breakdown in the refrigeration unit had left me dragging my feet and half delirious with hunger. When I walked in, the table was set. Nothing fancy. Just spaghetti, garlic bread, a salad. A single beer on a napkin. She was already in the guest room. There was a note. Didn't know when you'd be back. Figured I'd guess. You can heat it up if it's cold. I'm not waiting for thanks. I didn't eat right away. I sat down at the table, staring at the steam curling off the food, and tried to figure out what this all meant. Because this new version of us, it wasn't love. Not yet. Maybe not ever. It was repair. And not the kind where you patch things up and pretend they were never broken. It was the kind where you sweep the glass into a pile and decide whether the pieces are worth rebuilding into something new or throwing away completely. She gave me her new phone a few days later. It was something she'd upgraded to quietly after ditching the old one I'd already seen. She handed it to me in the middle of a rainy Saturday afternoon while I was fixing a dripping pipe under the kitchen sink. I looked up from the cabinet, water dripping from my wrist, and saw her standing there barefoot with the phone in her hands. No secrets, she said. I figured if I'm gonna say it, I should mean it. I took it. Scrolled for a minute. Messages were mostly from her therapist, a few group texts about upcoming library events, and some shopping receipts. Nothing hidden. No locked folders. Just the mundane heartbeat of someone trying to live differently. Okay, I said and handed it back. She nodded once, left it on the counter, and walked away. From that point on, something shifted inside me. I still didn't trust her. That wasn't something you turn back on like a light. But I believed she understood that. I believed that she wasn't trying to speed through the discomfort anymore. She was living in it. And that gave me room to breathe. Weeks passed. The silence between us evolved from awkward to calm. I stopped flinching every time her phone buzzed. She stopped trying to fill space with small talk. There was something honest about the quiet. Something that allowed me to sit with my own pain instead of performing resilience for her sake. One night, out of nowhere, she asked, would it help if I moved out? It wasn't bitter. It wasn't dramatic. Just a genuine question. I don't know, I answered. Okay. That was it. No defensive backpedaling. No tears. Just acknowledgement. I didn't ask her to leave, but I appreciated the fact that she gave me the option. A few nights later, she came into the living room while I was watching an old baseball game rerun. She held something behind her back, an envelope. I muted the TV. This isn't pressure, she said. It's just clarity. She handed me the envelope and left the room. Inside were divorce papers. Already signed on her end. No threats. No demands. Just the documents filled out and waiting for my decision. She didn't ask me to read them that night. She didn't follow up the next day. She never brought them up again. It was her way of giving me back something I didn't even realize I'd lost, choice. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was reacting to her. I felt like I had the wheel again. I didn't make a decision right away. I left the envelope on the counter unopened. Not out of indecision, but because I wanted to make sure that whatever choice I made came from strength, not emotion. Not guilt. Not nostalgia. We stayed in that strange limbo for a while. Not together. Not apart. Just navigating a space between survival and something else. One morning, I caught her standing on the back porch in her slippers, staring out into the yard. She didn't hear me walk up behind her. You ever think it's possible to rebuild something from scratch? I asked. She turned slowly, surprised, but didn't smile. I think you have to burn it down first, she said. That was the moment I knew she got it. She understood that what we had wasn't salvageable. That we weren't trying to get back to what we were deciding whether we could become something else entirely. I hadn't forgiven her, but I respected the way she was owning what she did. The quiet way she handed me the truth and didn't try to sell it as anything else. The way she finally stopped needing to be seen as good. That was real. And in a world full of masks and damage control, real was enough to keep me from walking away, at least for now. Because the truth is, power doesn't come from catching someone in a lie or burning it all to the ground. It comes from knowing who you are when the dust settles and setting the terms for what happens next. 2 months later, Laura's brother got married. We were both invited. I debated skipping it, but curiosity pulled me in. I wanted to see her in public in front of people who used to see her as perfect. She didn't try to match my pace or reach for my hand. She walked beside me like a guest in her own family. During the reception, someone made a joke about that party. The old Laura would have deflected, maybe laughed it off. But she didn't. She simply said that was my fault. I made choices that hurt people. No drama. No excuses. It was the first time I saw her take full responsibility. That night, she handed me an envelope with divorce papers again. No demands. Just choice. I asked why she thought I needed to decide. She looked me in the eye and said, because I'm not rebuilding. I'm just making space in case you ever want to. Later that night, I sat at the backyard fire pit, staring at the envelope. Laura didn't come outside. She didn't hover. She just waited. I thought about everything, the lies, the silence, the unraveling, and the honesty that followed. Then I stood up, went inside, grabbed a lighter, and walked back out. We burned the papers together. Not out of forgiveness, but as a reset. No promises. No plans. Just ground zero. I told her, this doesn't mean we're okay. It means I'll see what's left after the smoke. Laura nodded. For once, she didn't cry. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was trapped in her storm. I had my own shelter now. Solid. Quiet. Mine. If love ever returned, it would walk through truth, not guilt.